This Korean Mafia boss thought power could protect him from everything, so he rejected and abandoned his unborn son. But now his very life depends on that same son he threw away. Will the son save him or let him die alone? Stay with me, because this story will break your heart and put it back together again. My name is Minjun Park, and in the late 1990s, Chicago's South Side belonged to me. I ran the Korean Mafia with an iron fist. I was cold. I was violent. I believed only in power. Family meant nothing to me. Love was for weak people who got themselves killed. I controlled drug routes that stretched across 3 states. I owned legitimate businesses as cover: restaurants, import companies, car dealerships. Politicians feared me. Police looked the other way. My life was expensive cars, private clubs where normal people could never enter, and blood on my hands that never seemed to wash off. I would stand in my penthouse overlooking the city and think to myself, why do I need family when I have an empire? Why do I need love when I have respect? I believed nothing could ever bring me down. But life has a way of teaching lessons to those who think they are untouchable. In the spring of 1999, I attended a community center fundraiser. It was not my usual scene. I only went because one of the politicians I owned asked me to show my face, make it look like I cared about the community. I walked through that community center like a king inspecting his kingdom. My suit cost more than most people there made in 6 months. My watch could put food on 3 people's tables at a time. I shook hands, I smiled. I played the part of the successful businessman giving back to society. But inside, I felt nothing but contempt for these people and their small lives. That's when I saw her. Keisha Washington. She was 22 years old, setting up chairs for the event. She wore a simple dress and her hair was pulled back. She was not flashy. She was not trying to impress anyone. But there was something about her that caught my attention. It was her warmth. The way she smiled at an elderly woman who needed help. The way she laughed with the children running around the room. My world was cold and dark. Keisha was light itself. I approached her. I introduced myself as a businessman, an importer who helped small businesses get products from Korea. It was not completely a lie. I did own import companies. I just failed to mention what else came through those shipping containers. Keisha smiled at me. She was polite but not impressed by my expensive suit or my confident manner. She had no idea who I really was. To her, I was just another man at a fundraiser. I was fascinated. Women in my world threw themselves at me. They wanted my money, my power, my protection. But Keisha treated me like I was ordinary. It made me want her more. I asked if I could take her to dinner. Keisha hesitated. She worked 2 jobs, one at a diner and one at a childcare center. She also volunteered at the community center 3 nights a week, helping at-risk kids with homework. She barely had time to sleep, let alone date. But something about my attention flattered her. I seemed different from the men in her neighborhood. I seemed like I had made something of myself, so she said yes. For the next 4 months, I pursued Keisha like she was the most important deal of my life. I took her to nice restaurants. I brought her flowers. I talked about the future, about building something together, about how she was different from anyone I had ever met. And it was true in a way. Keisha was different. She cared about people. She believed in goodness. She saw the best in everyone, even me. I kept my real life hidden from her. When my phone rang with business, I would step away and handle it quietly. When she asked about my work, I gave vague answers about shipping schedules and supplier meetings. Keisha had no reason not to believe me. Keisha fell in love. She believed every word I said. She believed we had a future together. She started imagining what our life would look like. Maybe a small house in a better neighborhood. Maybe children one day when we were both more stable. Simple dreams. Honest dreams. The kind of dreams that had no place in my world. 4 months into our relationship, Keisha discovered she was pregnant. Her hands shook as she held the test. She was terrified but also hopeful. She and I had talked about the future. Surely this was part of it. She called me and asked me to meet her. There was something important she needed to tell me. We met at a park near the lake. Keisha's heart was pounding as she told me the news. She watched my face, waiting for surprise, maybe concern, hopefully joy. Instead, she saw my expression go cold, completely cold. Like a switch had been flipped and the man she knew disappeared. I laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was cruel. I looked at Keisha like she had just told me the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. I said I had no time for kids. I said I had no time for complications. Children were liabilities, responsibilities, chains that tied men down. I did not want chains. Keisha felt the ground shift under her feet. She asked me what I meant. We had talked about a future together. My face twisted into something ugly. I said she was stupid if she thought I was serious. I said she was a nice distraction, nothing more. I pulled out my wallet and threw money at her, $5,000 in cash. I told her to handle it, get rid of it, make it go away, then we could go back to normal. Keisha stared at the money on the ground. Her vision blurred with tears. She said she was keeping the baby. She said she would raise this child with or without me. My whole body went rigid. My voice dropped low and dangerous. I told her she meant nothing to me. I said she was stupid to think a man like me would stay with someone like her, a diner waitress, a nobody. I said if she ever contacted me again, if she ever told anyone I was the father, her family would pay for it. I would make sure of that. Then I walked away without looking back. I went back to my life. I pushed Keisha out of my mind like she never existed. I had more important things to worry about: territory disputes, money to collect, people to control. A pregnant woman I had used and thrown away was not my problem. That was my thinking back then. That was who I was. But while I continued building my empire, Keisha's life was falling apart. She went home and told her mother everything. Her mother, Gloria, was furious and heartbroken, but she stood by her daughter. She held Keisha while she cried and promised they would figure it out together. But Keisha's father, Reverend Washington, could not accept it. He was a church deacon, a respected man in their community. He said Keisha had brought shame to their family. He said she had thrown away her future and embarrassed him in front of everyone who knew them. He told her she could not stay in his house. If she wanted to keep this baby, she would have to do it somewhere else. Keisha packed her things and left the only home she had ever known. Gloria tried to change her husband's mind, but Reverend Washington's pride was stronger than his love. Keisha moved into a tiny apartment in one of the roughest neighborhoods on the south side. The building smelled like mold and cigarette smoke. The pipes rattled at night. Sirens wailed outside her window. But it was all she could afford. She kept working at the diner, her feet swelling as her pregnancy progressed. She saved every dollar. She cried herself to sleep most nights, one hand on her growing belly, whispering to her unborn child that everything would be okay, even though she did not know if it would be. Keisha gave birth to a son in March of 2000. She named him Marcus. The moment she held him, she made a promise. And she would never, ever tell him the truth about his father. When Marcus was old enough to ask, Keisha told him his father was a businessman who died before he was born. It was easier than explaining that his father looked at Keisha like she was garbage and walked away before Marcus even existed. She wanted to protect her son from that pain. Keisha raised Marcus alone. She worked double shifts at the diner. She went to night school and got her GED, then pushed further and became a social worker. She wanted to help other women in situations like hers, women who had been abandoned, women who were struggling to raise children alone, women who needed someone to tell them they were strong enough to survive. Marcus grew up watching his mother work herself to exhaustion. He saw her skip meals so he could eat. He saw her wear the same clothes for years so he could have new shoes for school. He saw her tiredness in the way she moved, the way she rubbed her feet at night, the way she sometimes fell asleep sitting up at the kitchen table with paperwork spread out in front of her. It made him angry at the world. It made him angry at his father, the man he believed was dead. But most of all, it made him determined. He would not let his mother's sacrifices be for nothing. Marcus studied hard. While other kids in his neighborhood got caught up in gangs or dropped out of school, Marcus kept his head down and focused. He stayed out of trouble. He got a scholarship to college and then to medical school. He wanted to give his mother the life she deserved. He wanted her to finally rest. He became a trauma surgeon, one of the best in Chicago. He was quiet, serious, and carried his mother's strength inside him like armor. Meanwhile, my life continued. I married twice over the years, both times to younger women who wanted my money and status. Both marriages ended when things got difficult. Both women left without looking back. I had no children. I had no real friends. I had men who worked for me, men who feared me, but no one who cared if I lived or died. I was alone at the top of my empire, exactly as I wanted to be. But by 2023 that empire was crumbling. A younger Korean gang challenged my territory. They were hungry and fearless. The Russians wanted my drug routes. They had more guns and less patience. My own men whispered about my age, about my weakness, about whether it was time for new leadership. Fear was the only thing that kept them in line, and fear dies when power dies. In September of 2023, everything collapsed at once. A coordinated hit by rival gangs went wrong. I survived, but barely. 3 bullets tore through my body. 1 lodged dangerously close to my spine. My crew scattered like rats abandoning a sinking ship. The younger gang took over my operations within days. The FBI, who had been building a case for years, froze my accounts. My properties were seized. Everything I had built over decades disappeared in less than a week. I ended up at County Hospital under a fake name, brought in by the last man who remained loyal to me. That man paid cash and disappeared. I was alone. I needed emergency surgery. The bullet near my spine was causing internal damage. Bleeding I could not see, but could feel draining my life away. Without surgery, I would die within weeks. With surgery, I might be paralyzed. My only hope was a specialist trauma surgeon who had successfully handled similar cases before. That surgeon was Dr. Marcus Washington. Marcus had no idea who I was when he first reviewed my case. Just another John Doe, another gunshot victim, another violent man reaping what he sowed in Chicago's endless cycle of gang warfare. But something about the case was challenging. The bullet's position was tricky. Most surgeons would not touch it. The risk was too high. But Marcus never walked away from difficult surgeries. That was not who he was. He agreed to operate. The evening before my surgery, Keisha came to visit Marcus at the hospital like she always did. She brought him dinner in a paper bag, homemade food because she knew he forgot to eat when he got busy. As she walked through the ICU corridor toward Marcus's office, she passed the glass walls of the patient rooms. She glanced inside out of habit. She had spent enough time in hospitals to know the look of critical care. Then she froze. Her whole body went rigid. 23 years disappeared in an instant. That face, those eyes, older now, grayer, weaker, but unmistakable. The man who destroyed her life was lying in a hospital bed 20 feet away, helpless and alone. Keisha's hand started shaking. The paper bag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. She felt sick. All the pain came crashing back, all the nights crying herself to sleep while pregnant, all the years of struggling, all the times Marcus asked about his father and she had to lie. All of it was right there in front of her, wearing a hospital gown and hooked up to machines that beeped steadily in the silence. She wanted to walk away, pretend she never saw me, let me be someone else's problem. But her feet would not move. A nurse noticed her standing there and came over. "Are you okay?" the nurse asked. Keisha's voice came out as a whisper. "Who is that patient?" The nurse glanced at the chart. John Doe, no family, no visitors except one man who paid cash and left. No insurance, no identification, just a gunshot victim waiting for surgery. Keisha knew she had to tell Marcus. But how do you tell your son that the man who rejected him before he was even born is lying in a hospital bed, and your son is the only person who can save him? She picked up the dinner bag with trembling hands and walked to Marcus's office. He was at his desk reviewing surgical plans, his face calm and focused the way it always was before a big operation. He looked up and smiled when she came in. "Hey, Mom, thanks for the food." Then he saw her face and stood up immediately. "What's wrong?" Keisha sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. Her voice shook as she told him everything: the lies, the truth about his father, the promises I made and broke, the threats, the abandonment, the money thrown at her feet like she was trash. She told him the patient in ICU bed 7, the John Doe with a bullet near his spine, was Min-jun Park, his father. Marcus said nothing for a long time. His face went completely blank. The expression he wore during difficult surgeries, the one that showed nothing at all. Then he stood up and walked out of the office. Keisha followed him, calling his name, begging him to talk to her. Marcus stopped in the hallway outside the ICU. He stood there staring at me through the glass. Then he turned to his mother. His voice was cold and calm. He said he did not have a father. He had a mother who was worth 1,000 men like Min-jun Park. Before we go any further, pause for a moment. If this story is already hitting you, if you feel that weight in your chest right now, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who grew up without a father. Someone carrying anger they don't know what to do with. Stories like this travel best when they're passed hand to hand. Now let's continue. Because what Marcus does next will change everything. And he would do his job because that was who he was. Not because of blood. Not because someone who shared his DNA thought they deserved help. Because Marcus was a surgeon and surgeons saved lives. That was it. That was all. Then he walked away to finish his surgical prep. Marcus reviewed my case with pure professional detachment. The surgery was high risk. The bullet's position meant one wrong move could sever the spinal cord permanently. 60% chance of paralysis, 30% chance of full recovery, 10% chance of death on the table. Most surgeons would refuse this case. Too risky, too likely to end in malpractice. But Marcus was not most surgeons. He scheduled the operation for the following morning. I woke up from my medicated sleep the day before the surgery. My body was weak. Pain radiated from every wound. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely afraid. I had faced death before. I had stared down men with guns. I had survived ambushes and betrayals. But this was different. This time, I was helpless. This time, my life depended on the skill of a stranger. When Marcus walked in to explain the procedure, I saw something familiar in his face but could not place it. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the medication. Marcus was cold and clinical. He explained the risks in clear, simple terms: 60% chance you will never walk again, 30% chance of full recovery, 10% chance you die during the operation. Do you understand? I nodded weakly. Marcus turned to leave. My voice stopped him. Do you have a family, doctor? Marcus paused in the doorway. His back was to me. Then he said, yes, a mother who raised me alone and taught me everything about strength. I heard something in that tone, something that made my chest tighten. What is your full name, doctor? Marcus turned slowly. His eyes were cold. Marcus Washington. The name hit me like a bullet tearing through flesh. Washington. Keisha Washington. I stared at Marcus and saw it, the eyes, the build, my own features mixed with hers. The child that should not exist was standing in front of me wearing a white coat and holding my life in his hands. My voice cracked. Is Keisha your mother? Marcus stared at me with pure contempt. Yes. I tried to speak, to explain, to apologize. Marcus cut me off. There is nothing to explain. You made your choices 23 years ago. Now I am making mine. I will do the surgery because saving lives is my job. Not because you deserve it. Not because of blood. Not because I owe you anything. Because I refuse to become the kind of man who lets people die out of hatred. Even people who deserve it. I broke. Tears ran down my face. I begged for forgiveness. I said I was wrong. I said I destroyed everything good in my life chasing power that meant nothing now. I said I did not deserve Marcus's help. I did not deserve to live. But I was begging anyway. Marcus listened without expression. Then he said I would get the surgery. After that, we would never see each other again. That was the deal. Take it or die alone. Marcus left the room before I could respond. That night, Keisha came to the hospital. She stood outside my room for a long time, staring through the glass. She could not make herself come in. Then I saw her. I pressed the call button. When the nurse came, I asked her to please let the woman in the hallway come inside, just for a moment. The nurse looked at Keisha. Keisha nodded slowly and walked in. We stared at each other across 23 years of pain. I looked old and broken. Keisha looked tired but strong. I apologized. I said I was a coward and a fool. I said Keisha deserved better. I said Marcus deserved better. I said I had nothing to offer but regret. Too little, too late. Keisha's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. She said she did not come for apologies. She came to tell me that Marcus was twice the man I ever was, and he became that man without my name, without my money, without my blood meaning anything. She said my biggest loss was not my empire or my freedom. It was never knowing the son I threw away, a son who turned out to be everything I pretended to be. Strong, brave, a man who kept his word. Then she left. The surgery happened the next morning. It took 9 hours. Marcus worked with absolute precision. His hands never shook. His focus never wavered. He removed the bullet fragment by fragment. He repaired damaged tissue. He stabilized the spine. Every movement was calculated. Every decision was correct. The surgery was successful. I would live. I would walk again. But I would need months of recovery. 2 days after the surgery, the FBI found me. My fake identity was blown. Someone had talked, or maybe someone had been paid to talk. Either way, federal agents walked into my hospital room and arrested me. I was charged with racketeering, drug trafficking, conspiracy to murder, and a list of other crimes that would put me away for life. My trial would happen after I recovered. I was looking at life in prison without possibility of parole. Before they transferred me to the prison hospital, I asked to see Marcus one last time. Marcus came. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, face blank. I thanked him for the surgery. Then I said I had one thing left. Hidden money the FBI did not know about. Offshore accounts in Marcus's name. Money I had put there years ago in a moment of guilt I never acted on. It was Marcus's. All of it. Millions of dollars. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to take care of Keisha for the rest of her life. Marcus looked at the account information. The numbers. The passwords. The access codes. Then he tore up the paper. He said he did not want anything from me. Not money, not connection, not closure. He had everything he needed. A mother who loved him. A life built on his own work, his own hands, his own choices. I could keep my blood money or let the government take it. Marcus did not care. Then he left. He did not look back. I was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. I died in prison 4 years later from a heart attack. Marcus was notified as next of kin. He did not attend the funeral. Neither did Keisha. They did not owe me their grief. But something changed in Marcus after that. He started volunteering at youth centers, mentoring boys growing up without fathers. He never mentioned his own story. He just showed up. He listened. He told them they could be more than what the world expected. Keisha watched her son continue to become the man she raised him to be. Years later, Marcus got married to a woman who loved him for exactly who he was. They had a son. Marcus named him after Keisha's father, the grandfather who had rejected her, but who she later forgave before he died. The cycle of abandonment ended with Marcus. He became the father he never had. The man I could have been, but chose not to be. I built an empire and lost everything. Keisha lost everything and built a life worth living. Marcus was thrown away and became the one person who could have saved the man who abandoned him. Power dies. Money disappears. Empires crumble. But the choices you make and the people you damage, those things live forever. That is what remains when everything else is gone. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who believes power is everything, or someone who thinks their past defines them. And if you want more stories like this, stories about choices, consequences, and the quiet strength it takes to break a cycle, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. That way, when the next story drops, you'll be here from the beginning. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.